So we're starting our circle theme off with some Suffolk puffs. I've just got a range of different ones here that we've had a little look through already. So we can do some multiples of really small little Suffolk puffs that could then be put onto these individual panels that you might want to create a hanging. So they could be positioned round in a circle kind of shape, perhaps with one in the middle. So with the finer silks and finer cottons, you find that they do pull really quite well into the center there, but you can always embellish these with some beads and stitches as well. With the thicker fabric, so this upholstery thicker weight and this denim, you see what you end up with is a more of a gap in the middle. So with this one here, that's the denim, what's quite nice is seeing the pattern of the back of the denim. So you might just sort of want to create those and leave those as they are. And then I was thinking I'll do another one where I'll do it the reverse way. So I'll fold it this way, so have the right side up. And then therefore it will make the outside, this bit of the Suffolk puff, the light bit, and the back of the denim, and the center will be the dark, just to keep switching those around. So if you've got any old jeans or denim, that could be nice to use as well. Think about playing with the scales as well, so you can do little ones or a really big one. So in the middle of this one here, I've just added another piece of fabric that I just popped in before I pulled it taut, so you get the addition of that in the middle there as well, rather than just seeing the back of the fabric. There is the option to do the padded Suffolk puffs, which I can do a quick demonstration of as well. So rather than this side being the front of your Suffolk puff, that becomes the back that we stuff and then flip it over, and then this side becomes the front. So they could always be nice to create in miniature. The other thing to have a go at is using some kind of couching around the outside edge, which you may have tried before, or even adding some little beads to the outside of your Suffolk puffs. With this one here, as I was stitching and gathering, I've threaded some beads onto my needle to add into the gathers. So I did this sort of every few gathers, so there is a lot there. And when I demonstrate it shortly, I'll leave more of the gathers between, so there's less beads on that as well. The other thing we just mentioned, from circles before, we've made these sort of type flowers, or they could be leaves, and they can either be done by cutting a semicircle in, cutting a circle in half, and then sewing it right sides together and flipping it out to create these little kind of cone shapes, and then gathering these along the bottom. So they create almost little leaves as well. So if you did want to add those to the edges of your Suffolk puffs as well, that could work nicely, just as an extra addition. On the Pinterest board, which I'll show you, you'll see that there's a cluster where they've sort of created a series of Suffolk puffs, and then these gathered leaves sort of are set all the way round. If you don't want to do that sort of cutting your semicircle in half and stitching that bit, the quick way to do that, and I'd suggest not to do it with too thick a fabric, is take a circle and you will fold it in half, fold it again into quarters, and then just stitch and gather along that edge. So what it will be is just a slightly thicker leaf when we've stitched and folded a semicircle, but you still get that sort of same effect that you could then add to one of your flowers as well from using a circle. So that's our starting point. Like I said, I've had a little go with denim there, and I will also demonstrate in a moment the one with the beads as well. So just to quickly show you there, that is the other reverse there of the denim sewn together there, just with it flipped the other way. So the other thing I was going to show you was adding some beads. So what I've done is used my finer cotton, because I need a finer needle to thread my beads on, and I've sewn here I've just sewn through about 3 or 4 stitches, and when I pull and gather that, that's just sort of taken in a small area of the edge there of the circle. So I've got a knot here, came down and up about 3 or 4 times, pull that and gather it. I'll push back through that seam allowance to the front side there, and then I can just thread my bead or button on to the needle, and then I'm going back in the other side of it. So whatever sort of depth your bead is or button, just try and do a stitch that goes about that length, and then it will just sit nicely there on the outside edge. And then I'll just do another 3 or 4 stitches through this seam allowance. One, more, pull that through, and then give that a little pull, then come back up and thread another bead on. You can play around with how close you put together the beads. That will be dependent on how thick your fabric is and how sort of big the circle is. So here, this one here, I did it more like sort of every other, and you can see you've ended up with a lot of beads and a larger area in the middle that I will want to sort of cover with something else, either pop another Suffolk puffin or a piece of fabric. So on this one, I'm trying it every 3 or 4 stitches instead. So I've gone all the way round now. So as you can see, again, even doing this because they're quite thick beads, we've still got that gap in the middle, not quite as big as this other one. But I will now just take my needle into the back of the Suffolk puff. So it's just sort of pulled it all in all the way around, and then I'll just sew a little knot there to finish that off. So that's a version there with some little beads. So to talk about adding them to a panel, if you want to add them to a backing panel there, there's a few ways you can do that. What you can do is stitch on part of the circle before you actually sew it, so you wouldn't sort of see it around the edge. And again, normally a Suffolk puff sort of shrinks to about half the size there. So this was sort of a 4-inch one, and I've drawn a 2-inch circle there. So what I would do is stitch around there. I could do that with a running stitch or a back stitch and have it already attached to the back. Then I'd fold over this raw edge and create that Suffolk puff in the same way, and it would then be attached. So if this was almost, when it did come in, you had a little bit of a gap there, that wouldn't be a problem because it would still be anchored down. The way I tend to do them, because it just gives you a bit more time to play around really with where you want to position them, is I will pop them down where I want them to go, pop a pin in, and then you can either just do a running stitch around the edge so that you'd see it. You could always lay it down and couch a piece of cord to anchor it down to the backing and to the edge of your Suffolk puff. Or what we can do is an invisible slip stitch. So I'll just get threaded up to show you that. We've done this before on needle turned applique. So I've just threaded up with a bit of machine cotton, and I'm just coming up from the back, just a small little knot in my thread. And then just where the Suffolk puff lays there on the sort of fold, I will just push the needle into the fold of that Suffolk puff, go about 1/2 centimetre along, catch a bit, take it into the back of the cloth, come back up by about 1/2 centimetre, one in here, and come back up about 1/2 centimetre along, and then again catch a little bit here on this fold, wiggle it down the fold of the Suffolk puff, and pull that through. Your other option, if you wanted to as well, is you could always get a little bead. I think my needle's going to be too big for these. I can thread that onto my needle, and rather than do a slip stitch, is just anchor it down with a little bead time. So that's just a little bit too big, that needle. So that's another option where you're sort of catching it down with some really nice little beads all the way around too. You could always sort of anchor it in this way and then also go round and add some little French knots as well, if you wanted to have a stitch that was seen, or continue in this way here where I'm just doing this small little slip stitch till I get back to the beginning.